Katie Karen Burchill. Welcome to another art journal tutorial. And here are the cone flowers that we are going to create on a page. This one is dedicated to those of us who cannot draw. You can still art journal, and I'm going to prove it to you. So I'm working in my 7 by 10 Canson Mixed Media journal. Now this page I have not gessoed or anything. I've taped off so that I don't get stuff into the coils, but that's about it. I put a selection of colors. I've got a yellow, a light magenta, orange, light blue permanent, and I start off this page and I think I want to make a light, airy background to show off those cone flowers. I wanted to try something and do something a little bit different. I'm mixing it with gesso there to get that soft color in there. And that's something that I've just started doing. Seen some YouTubers doing that, I think Sean Petit and a few others. And I've kind of adapted it and brought it into my art journaling, and I love that effect. Here I'm adding some phthalo turquoise, and it's just a darker, richer colored. I was getting a little too light, and if you know me, you know I love my bright colors, so that made me a little happier. This is called Peacock Doily, and I love this doily mandala type stencil, and I'm putting the gesso through the stencil here, and it's getting, it's lightening the background and giving that lovely patterning to my background. I want an interesting background to set off the cone flowers. And you can see that really lightened everything up. So then I'm coming back in with this scroll work stencil. Both of these are from the Crafters Workshop, and I will put a link to, them in the description box below. There's also the Shopify link for TCW and a discount code down there. So check that out. So I'm just using the phthalo turquoise, I believe. That's a premium paint, Deco Art Americana. Now I printed these cone flowers onto tissue paper, regular dollar store tissue paper with my laser printer. It was a free printable adult coloring sheets that people had put out. I had saved it to one of my Pinterest boards years ago and just rediscovered it and thought, okay, I bet I can do this. So I start using the water brush to cut the tissue paper, end up using my scissors off camera, and then these little bits in between, I get out my X-Acto knife. Make sure your X-Acto knife is sharp, hold down the tissue paper. But if you don't want to cut those little bits out in between, they're probably going to go translucent anyways. So I'm positioning this coneflower on the page, and I'm taking my Liquitex Basics liquid matte medium, and I'm putting it under and over. Now the tissue paper, it does get a little fragile, but not as bad as napkins. And you can see how you can still see the stenciling coming through. Now, my hope is to paint this. So those of us who can't draw or think we can't draw or just too scared to draw, my hand is up. This is a great alternative. Find free printables, adult coloring sheets, and use those in your art. Now, if you don't have a printer, you can trace onto tissue paper. Just make sure that you use a water-soluble marker. Now I put a coat of the matte medium on there, but then I'm coming back and I'm putting a coat of clear gesso. It goes on kind of cloudy and it dries clear. And that's because I wanted to paint on top of this and I wanted to have a smooth, non-porous surface. So I'm taking my colors. I've got quinacridone magenta, deep violet, I've got the orange there, and I wasn't exactly sure what colors I was going to use. I've got a selection of fine angle brushes and fine liner brushes, and I'm mixing the color and just painting the petals. Now, if you want to look at the colors, coneflowers come in every range, some more orangey to more pinkish. And I just wanted to get a base coat down here. I wasn't even attempting to get every coneflower the exact same shade because depending on how the light's hitting it and the shadows, in real life, the colors are going to look different. I also know that I'm going to come back and add more paint to this, add shading and highlighting. So this is just the base color. And I ended up using a very small angle brush. And angle brushes I find really get into those nooks and crannies and very easy to use. I am adding just a smidge of water to my medium-bodied, heavy-bodied Liquitex Basic paints. And I want the heads of the coneflowers, the seed pods, to look a little more orange. But I know I'm going to come back in and add more detail to it. But, I had this idea to doing this. I wasn't sure how it was going to work out. I was very, very happy with how it turned out. And I love the end result, the end page. And you can still see the stenciling through this, which I kind of like as well. You kind of lose a little bit of that in the future steps. But you could have left it like this. You didn't have to do the next step if you did not want to. I'm just painting the green leaves and I'm using Hooker's green here. I do go in with other colors again, but again, that's my base coat. I've added a little bit of water and that just helps make the paint go on a little smoother, a little easier. So that's a trick if you're struggling with using the paint. So now I'm coming in with gesso and colors, and I'm adding, just details. And this is where I find that the cone flowers, one, you're losing some of the stenciling underneath, but they really come to life. And I have to thank Sean Petit and her videos. Um, I've been watching her and seeing what she does, and I got brave enough today to try it out in a similar fashion. She uses her stencils as her guides. I am using a adult coloring sheet as my guide. But by adding these steps, I'm making it more painterly and making it very much my own. And I'm not really worried about staying inside the lines, but adding that gesso in there really is critical. And while I had other colors there, I pretty much used the quinacridone magenta and the gesso. I like the shading of this, the colors, just how it came to be. So again, I was trying something new, and along the way, I discovered what I like. And it's really hard to mess up. So I'm trying on the leaves, adding a little bit of yellow, a little bit of green, a little bit of gesso, just to make it interesting. And it's adding a little bit of texture there. It just, while the cone flowers look nice with the first coat of paint, I really think adding the gesso and these details just really made them come alive. Now you can look at stock photos to see what coneflowers look like, what the leaves look like, to get the shades right. Use whatever you need to help guide your decision making. I start putting on some gesso onto the seed heads. Gets a little carried away, so I end up coming back with more orange. And I just keep playing with it till I get the effect that I want. Now, I love the background, and I love that there's the pink in the background, there's some of that orange in the background, there's some of the green. All the colors that are in the coneflower are also in the background. But I'm not so used to those fine pastel-y colors, and I felt that I needed more depth. So I took the phthalo turquoise and I'm mixing it with a little bit of the gesso and water and doing a wash on top of the background that I had. I just thought maybe there was a little too much color. You can still see the yellow, the orange, the pink shining through. You can still see the patterning. It's just pushed it back a bit. Now, if I was doing this again and I knew or if I wanted to do this on a cradled wood panel, which I think I'm going to, I would maybe do all the steps because I like how it all layered up and how it looks, or I may just go for something a little more neutralized from the beginning, more blues and greens. Now I do off camera adds a little bit more pink in some areas. Now that I know what shade the cone flowers are, now that those decisions have been made, I also go back in and add a little bit more of the stenciling or bring it out just because it pushed back the pattern a little bit too much. So it's kind of a dance between bringing something out and pushing it back. Splattering with the quinacridone magenta and then splattering with gold. And that gold really reads well with the seed heads of the coneflower and then the magenta of the flowers as well. It just introduces a little bit more of that color into your background. So once that was dry, I am coming in with my angle brush and I'm doing some shading with black paint or black and quinacridone magenta mixed. I'm shading the seed heads, just making these come alive a little bit more. And I spend a lot of time doing this. A lot of it is off camera. It's a hard thing to film because I need to work up close. And then I'm adding highlights as well with white. And I'm not sure if I copied that on camera, but you'll notice in the final pictures at the end, there's a lot of that. So I add some shading, I add some highlights, I go back and forth. I also shade around on the blue part on the outside of the cone flower to give it shadow. And here I'm shading the leaves. Would you have changed the background or would you have left the pastel background? Because looking at it now, after the fact, I think it would have been okay the way it was. I'm just using the black and I'm edging my page. And I'll go back maybe a couple times to get the depth of color that I am looking for. Just like to thank people for all their comments. I do read them all and I do respond to them all. They mean the world to me. Now I've got my wooden stamps, letter stamps, and I stamped out the saying, "The earth laughs in flowers," and I'm playing with the arrangement of this. Now, in hindsight, I would have turned this to the other orientation and had the words on the one side. I'm So if I was doing it again, that's what I would do. And I have white acrylic paint on the side, and I am pressing the letter stamps into the white acrylic paint and then stamping. And then I thought, maybe I want to go black, but the black you really didn't notice on the background. The white really stands out, and if I had left the more pastel-y one, the black probably would have been the final choice. So once I use the stamp with acrylic paint, I am wiping it off on a baby wipe, but that's off camera. I have several sets of wooden stamps, and I will look on Amazon and find a link to some that are similar. I am using them more and more, and I love using them. But I typically stamp them out with ink on paper just to get the placement, so I know exactly where I'm going to put the words, and I get the spacing correctly. But as you can see, in the short term, if you make a mistake, if it doesn't stamp very well, you can come in with a baby wipe, very gently wipe it off and redo it. If you don't want to be so brave to stamp right onto the page, you can stamp it onto tissue paper and then glue the tissue paper down with matte medium. But that wouldn't work for white letters. That would only work if you were using another color. Now I'm adding a little more highlights, and it really goes well with the white that's in the letters. It just pops. So there was an awful lot of tweaking and playing with this and adding those little details. But it was so worth it. I absolutely loved. And maybe if I paint enough using other people's printables and adult coloring pages, I will get the confidence to actually just go and paint the coneflowers freehand. I'm thinking maybe I could. I guess we're going to have to stay tuned and find out. Here I'm shading on the outside just to give it a little bit more depth. But I want to be perfectly clear so you understand. A lot of what I've done on this page isn't even being done on camera because it's a lot of repetitiveness and stuff. So on camera, I had 1 hour, 9 minutes of video. Then there was a lot of time that I did off camera. So when you're trying to do a page, don't think that it only takes the 15 minutes of the video and cut yourself some slack. Using my Secura glaze, just adding some details to the seed heads, adding a little more interest. We've got some close-ups of this finished page. I hope you love it as much as I do. Give me a comment. Share this video and my channel with your creative friends. Start following me on Instagram. Join my Facebook group, Mixed Media Creations. Until the next video, keep creating.